Hello LA 590. This walkthrough will be for assignment 3 and we'll go ahead and get started. So if you've not already, you'll want to download this zipped file. I've already done that, and if I go to my downloads folder, there it is. If you haven't found this out, it's actually quite useful. With the zip file, you can just double click in Windows and then right click and copy that folder. That way the zip file stays where it's at, and if you need to go back to get it again, you'll know how. So I'll go ahead and right click and paste this on my desktop. So in this folder, there's a few folders and files. The one you'll want to use for the assignment is Fargo Parcels. The assignment 1 study area is just a shapefile I used in the example, which I created here. I'll go ahead and open this up and zoom out. So it's a PDF, but what's special about it is that it is a geospatial PDF. If I open this up in a file such as Avenza's PDF maps, I think it's called, it keeps all of its geospatial information. So very simple colored theme-based map that we created with the shapefile data. Now for this walkthrough, I'll do something a little bit different, just to give you a couple different ideas of what you can do. So, here's an example of a finished product. For the walkthrough, I want to do something with the parcels that are along the two one-way streets in downtown Fargo. So it seems like a reasonable something to show. So I'll go ahead and start by adding that start parcels, and just so you can see where I'm at here. There's my desktop, there's the folder I just downloaded, Fargo Parcels, and there we go. So first thing you probably want to do is just get your data down to something more manageable. This is a lot of information, a couple thousand or more features represented here. And the area I want to look at, I know, is kind of down here. It's in downtown Fargo. So I'll show you a couple of ways that we've gone over in class just to get this set smaller. So I think my area is right down here somewhere. What I'll do is grab my feature select tool, and I'll go ahead and just choose an area like this. Now what I'll do is right click on the source list, go to data, and export data. Now this is really going to be a temporary file for all practical purposes. I'll just keep that name as it is, and I will probably delete it later. So yes, I will add it. So there we go. I've got my original set and my smaller set. Now you might notice that some of these are oddly disjointed or exist in multiple parts, and it's actually called a multi-part. Don't worry about it right now. Just be aware if you select something in here, it might also select something way out in the boonies. So don't worry about it. It's called a multi-part shapefile. And what that basically means is it's represented by one record in the attribute table. So we'll see that again a little bit later. But anyway, that is one way to make your file set smaller. Just select it and export it to something new. The other way, first of all, let me deselect that, is to start an edit session and just manually delete these. So this is a destructive process, but it works fine. So if I right click, edit features, start editing, and now I can select features and then just hit delete on my keyboard. So another way I could do this until I only have the files or the parcels that I want to work with. Now of course you can also do the select method, which we did in class. We could select by attribute, I could select by location, but this particular example I need to do a little bit more interactive manual selecting, because there's no way, at least with this set, to say select the parcels that have a face adjacent to NP or First Avenue in Fargo. But if you're thinking like that, you probably could down the road easily build queries to select the data. So it doesn't hurt to be thinking like that, but it also doesn't hurt to know how to do some surgical manual selecting. So anyway, I'm still in my editor. I can select these and delete these you do not want to forget to stop your edit session, so I will do that now. And yes, I will save my edits. Just another method to get rid of information and data. So once again, I'm going to go back and select some parcels, and I'll do another export over here. But to help me, I'm going to add a base map, and I'll just do this Bing Maps hybrid. Now this will take a second here to load. There we go. If I zoom in, so for my map, I want to show estimated parcel total values for parcels that are adjacent to NP and First Avenue. Those are the two one-ways in downtown Fargo under consideration to be converted to two-ways. So it seems like information that might be useful in some context. So here we go. We've got the select tool. And if you click on something, it is selected. If you click on something else, it deselects the first one and selects whatever you're clicking on. So what you want to do is hold down Shift and click on the ones you want to add. If you accidentally pick something you don't want, click on it again and it deselects. So that's one way. I'm going to go ahead and clear that selection here because I don't think I've gone over this, but definitely worth showing. On the select tool, if you click that little black arrow, you can see different ways that you can select. The default is select by rectangle. The other one is select by polygon. So that one is really useful for things that aren't rectangular. For example, let's click that and notice that I'm just clicking to create these points. So you can do some, what I like to say, surgical selection methods. Let's deselect that. They're pretty self-explanatory, but for this one, I'm going to do a select by polygon, and I also select by line would probably work, but this one will be a little bit quicker. So I'll select by polygon, and what I'm going to do is draw a polygon that just grazes the edge of all of these parcels along the two one-ways. Now you want to be careful because, here's a very small parcel, so I just want to make sure I only get that top one. And I'll go to university. If you're zoomed in too far and you need to move, I recommend using your arrow keys on your keyboard. So I'm in the middle of this operation, but if I tap my arrow keys, I can nudge this map in either direction. Like that. It takes a little while to redraw, but it works. So let's see. Alright, so there is one selection. Now, if I was being really careful, I'd probably export this as another data set and just call it, the NP Avenue parcels. But there's some overlap. I'll go ahead and select the other ones along first. So remember, if you hold on Shift, it'll do an additive select. You don't need to actually hold on Shift until you double click to complete your polygon. So not touching any keys right now, just my mouse. I will repeat the process up here. So a good, even if this is not your data set or the theme that you want to show, it's probably worth following along just for the exercise. Now, I want to be careful to not also reselect that because it will actually deselect. So I'll draw my polygon up here. Now I will hold on Shift, very important that you do that, and then double click, and it does an additive select. So there are the parcels I would like to work with. I think I got them all. So I will right click on that set, go to Data, Export Data. So before, because it was really a temporary file, I tend to just keep it that default name, and that reminds me later on that it's really garbage. Things that I want to keep, I tend to be very careful to rename. So let's call these NP and First. Now I'm not sure if I need the underscore characters, force of habit. It'll always work if you do it that way. If you use a space, it may or may not work. So just be careful with that. Stay away from funky characters. Notice that it's putting this in the same folder that I added the first set from. I could change that if I'd like, but we'll go ahead and do OK. Add those. So there we go. Now let's take a little side look here. Here's that folder that I downloaded. I've only really created 2 new feature sets, but notice I've created about a dozen or more files. Again, when you're working with GIS data, your files will multiply like bunnies. So here's the set I want to work with. Let's turn that off. I'll turn off the base map too, just to for 2 reasons. It's a little bit easier to see. I also won't accidentally choose a set that I don't want. So if this one is still on, I can still select from that set. Oops, I'm still in polygon mode here. Let's deselect. And I'll put that back to the default select by rectangle. So, that's why I like to turn layers on and off. All right, so that's a good first step. Just get your data down to what you want to show, and then you can worry about styling it in the next step. So styling, right click. A good start before you jump to the symbology, which is down in properties, is to be aware of your attribute table. Now, you probably want to be aware of this before this step because you have to have things in here to be able to style off of. So this data or this feature set is fairly data rich. The 2 that I'll work with, or the one I'll work with, is the total value column, and possibly maybe the zoning. Let's see here. So there's lots and lots of information here. Let's go ahead and close that little review here. If you go to properties, so before I style it with the symbology, I'm going to turn on and off some fields just to make it a little less headache inducing. So this button right here, turn all fields off. It's a good start. And let's see, the ones I would like to use are total value. How about type description, use code description? Yeah, use code, why not? And zone. All right, so maybe I'm not quite sure what I want to do. I mean, I in this example I do know what I want to do, but for the sake of a walkthrough, you may not know what you want to do. So just choose a few attributes, hit apply, close this window. Now that doesn't get rid of the attributes, it just makes it much easier to look at. And once you're in this attribute, you can sort these columns by ascending, descending, alphabetical, all kinds of ways. So one thing worth noting here, all of these lots are zoned downtown mixed use. So that really defeats the purpose of categorizing or styling based off of that because they're all the same. I could just style it by the use code description, which is commercial apartment. That's a little vague. I could style it by the type description. That's a little too specific. Let's go ahead and look at that. So in the example I created in class, I went through and changed, for example, all of the single family dash loft and the single family, I just made them 1. All of the retail offices and apartments, I made those mixed use. So you can manually add these or change these as needed. It really is up to you. So let me close that. Now, I'm going to show you 3 different ways to style this. So because I want to do that, I'm going to make 3 copies of this. If you ever want to just copy a layer, you can select copy. I don't quite know if this works. It does, but I'm going to show you another way. Copying and pasting works, but I'm a little hesitant because you might be looking at the same data, and if you edit one, the other one might reflect those changes. I like to do an export and a re-import of the entire data set. So nothing is selected. I'm going to right-click data and export data. Once again, I'll give this a name. Let's say NP. Let's call it testing. Don't worry about the colors, they are just randomly assigned. So let's just say I just want to style this based off of the description of the zoning. So to do that, let's go to Properties, Symbology, Categories, and I will select Use Code Description and add all values. So hit Apply, hit OK. There you go. If that's worth showing, I guess you could do it. It's probably a minimal expectation that you at least do this. In other words, a C, but it's one option that you've got. If you want to change these colors, you can double click either directly on that icon over here and just click a style, or you can go back to that symbology and choose a different color ramp. If you choose the same color ramp over and over, it randomizes each time. And as I've mentioned, these sort of random color sets are good for categories. The gradients are good for scales, such as values. Let's hit apply. Okay. All right, so anyway, that's just one option. Another option would be to create your own values. You've got the attribute, which is use description or zone or type description, but you may want to create your own values. So here's a little bit of somewhat of a hack. You can create your own columns, but you need to use Arc Catalog to do that. And the process, it's a lot of work. So a lot of times what I'll do is just reuse a column that I don't really want to keep. So for example, my use code description, I'm going to edit that. Now the reason is when you create your own attributes, you have to specify if it's an integer or a number or how many characters it holds. Like I say, it's just complicated. This way it works well. So how do we change those? Let's say I want to sort my type description, and I want to just select, for example, all my warehouses and all my vacant land and all my utility, and I want to call those 1. Well, you can't just select. I'm trying to drag here and it's not working. Remember, you have to start an edit session. Whenever you want to add or change or delete anything, you have to do an edit session. So let's go ahead and let's close that. You can either right click on the property or the layer, or you can right click up here and go to editor. So this brings up our editor window. I will start editing. Because I went about it this way, you need to select the data that you want to edit. Make sure you get the right one. NP testing. Okay. So not only can I edit the features in here, I can edit my attribute table. So if I open this up, you can type whatever you'd like. Now the problem is you can only do one at a time. So I mentioned this in class. This is where it gets a little kind of goofy. If I wanted to select, for example, utility, vacant, and warehouse, and I've decided that those need to be a certain category, you can select them. You have to click this leftmost column and hold down Shift. So there we go. I'm going to try a little experiment here. Oop, that didn't work. Okay, just ignore that, what I was doing. Back to here. So you might be tempted to just go ahead and try to type something that will still only change 1. What you need to do is on your editor toolbar, click this little button called Attributes. So that brings up this guy. Now keep a close eye on this list. Make sure once again you're looking at just the data that you want to edit. We are not quite done. So on your attribute list, you'll still want to select every record. So I'll choose that one, scroll down, hold down Shift. Okay, now after all that work, you can finally do a batch edit. And like I said, I'm just going to reuse that. So you know what, for some reason, let's call that primary study area. And hit enter. And notice it's now changed over here. So I am just kind of making these up here, but I'll select that other set, select it over here once again, and we'll make that one now. For the sake of just being quick here, I'm just kind of arbitrarily selecting these and giving them names. You would want to be a little bit more thoughtful in how you're doing that. Select description. What's next? Tertiary? Yeah. Third. There we go. Oops, and I got a couple stragglers in here. Let's make those so when you are done, just like before, you have to remember to stop your edit session. Yes, I'll save my edits. Now I've got a new category in which I can style these, and by style I just mean color. And once again, right click, properties. Notice that the styling that you've got is no longer applicable, even though it's showing up on your little source list there. So use and add all values. There we go. Hit apply. So this again doesn't really mean anything just because I was arbitrarily assigning those, but it's one way that you can go in there and manually create categories. So let's go ahead and delete that. And let's see, do I want this one? Nope, I want this one. So back on track. How do I categorize these based off of land values or estimate? Let's call it estimated. Whenever you're not quite sure, use the word estimated, and I'll cite your data. I'll show you how to do that here when we get to the layout section. So let's take a look at properties, Symbology. Now this one I'll do quantiles. Categories is good if you have set a fairly graspable set of values, but if every one is potentially different, every value for each one of these records, excuse me, you will want to use quantiles. When you first come here and you add a value, so let's say total value, notice that's the only one I can select because it knows that that is a number. It knows the other ones is a string value. I want to talk a moment about classification. So it defaults to this thing called Jenks, natural breaks, and it's a way to organize your data that factors in a lot of statistics. It uses standard deviations and it groups things together. Just know that it's kind of complicated and it's the default. If I hit this classify button, you can start to get an idea of what this means. So this is showing me my ranges are all different. Notice that the first set, 0 to 434,000, has that many parcels in it. The next range has that many, the next range has that many. So it's kind of this magical way to organize stuff. There are other ways. So for the method, you might decide that you want to do equal interval instead. So notice that that now changes, but it might not be the best classification system because it gets skewed. It's nice that it's a fairly digestible even increment, but I've only got like 2 or 3 features in each one of these other categories. So when we visually represent that, it's going to look mostly like one color. Let's see, what else do we got? Define interval. This is where I can manually, if these are close, I might just want to say 200 or 2 million or whatever that's at. And say 4 and 6. Whoops, those are quite small. I think I'm missing a 0. But you can come in here and manually enter those. The quantile breaks things down by percentages. So the first 20%, second 20%, etc. And natural breaks we already looked at. Geometric interval, you know what, I'm not even quite sure what that means. But I would recommend you either want to use equal interval or the natural breaks. Now, I'm going to kind of mix and match here. The natural breaks gets me in the ballpark of, of spreading these out so there's fairly equal visual representation based off of my category, my range. So that's what I like about janks. What I don't like is kind of these odd numbers over here. So what I'll do is I will highlight the natural breaks, but then I'm going to go to manual, and I'll edit these values to say something a little bit more digestible. Let's say 45, 450,000. This one, let's make that one 130 or 1.3 million. Let's make that one 3 million. Whoops, and I forgot a 0. 7 million. And let's just say, you know what? This is the highest value in the set. So on this last one, I just want that one to go off the map, because basically I want to say anything from 7 million to 10 million, or greater than 7 million, I should say, is colored. Now, if I were to change this to just 10 million, I think that's enough zeros. Notice that there is a little speck here that's showing me that something is outside of that range and it won't be styled. So let's just make that 20 million or 200 million, just so it's off the map. And I'm going to click on another value just so that gets registered. All right, this will help me say greater than 7 million. All right, seems like a lot of work. Again, it's really going to be up to you to decide what is the best way to classify these. And I've hopefully explained, why I've decided this is pretty good for my purposes. Let's hit OK, and hit apply, and OK. So a fairly reasonable representation. I forgot a step. Let me go back to my properties. This one right here. When we apply the label, this is what is shown when you create that really nifty automatic label. When we get to the layout, which we'll be getting to soon, I promise, this is what is shown. So if we edit those, you can make them say whatever you want. So for example, this first one, I'll say less than for 50K. This one I'll say for to 1.3 M. And this one we'll say 1.3 M to, and you get the idea. And greater. Now, the last edit, I was kind of you can't tab out of it. If I hit tab, nothing happens. Kind of force a habit. I like to just click on something else so I know that it was registered. Keep an eye over here. I didn't change the values. I have just changed the description of those values. So we are almost ready to start styling. The one other important thing we need to set is the coordinate system. So I'm going to take a few minutes here and talk about coordinate systems. How do you find out what you are set in? Well, you either just know. So if I right click on that data, properties, and let's do a source. So I can see that this is in that Fargo ground coordinate system. It's good because it's very precise for this area. It's bad that it's a non-standard coordinate system. So if I right click on my layers, I can reproject everything that's included. So if there's different projection systems, which there is, there's my Fargo data. There's also this Bing Maps, which has its own projection system. But I'm going to go to my coordinate system and add a new one. No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do new. I'm going to select from my predefined. But before I do that, I need to tell you something very important about coordinate systems. Some coordinate systems are very good at visually representing accurate shapes and accurate directions, but they may be lacking in accuracy in terms of measurement and area. Some are the other way around. They are very accurate in measurement and area, they just look like crap. So for example, let me add my WGS 84. You get the little warning. But notice it's very squishy looking. And if I turn on my base maps once again, you know, it's not an equal area map. But if I were to measure this using this tool right here, it would be accurate. Now I'll look at this parking ramp over here. Click there, take a look at my little dialog over here. Not changed because I moved my cursor, but it says 678. How do we know that that is correct? Well, we've got Google Earth and probably trust Google Earth, right? So here's that same area, measure tool, line. I will measure it. Yeah, close enough. So the point is, the measurement is correct. The visual display, not so much. All right, so let's change it to, now you couldn't dig through here and find these, but I don't want you to necessarily because I want to show you a better one. I'm going to choose Mercator Sphere. Let's see how that looks. All right, so looks a little bit better in terms of visual representation, and I think that was the one I told you to use in class. Might not have been the best one, and here's why. If I take my measure tool, click on that corner, click on this corner. Now take a look at my little dialog. It is showing up at almost 1,000 feet, which is obviously not correct. Little side note, yours might be snapping. If your cursor is snapping, that just means you've got, oh, where is it at? The snapping turned on. Here's that toolbar. I'll turn all of mine back on. Now if I do that, yep, see now it's snapping. So if yours looks like that, just keep your snapping toolbar on and turn on and off as you'd like. But anyway, point is, good visual display, shapes are correct, directions are correct, units, not so much. All right, so where's a nice one that will be the best of both? Here's what I'd recommend. Go to your properties, go to your coordinate system, and we will find one that has the Albers set is generally known for being equal area. So if you have Albers in the name, that's a good start. The other one is if you can find one specific to your zone, your state zone, that's also good. There's one that works pretty good for all of the contiguous United States. And that one is under predefined geographic coordinate system. Oh, I'm sorry, projected. And I've also got to dig to find this continental North America. And I'm looking for one, this USA contiguous Albers equal area conic. That's a pretty good one. So I will highlight that and click add to favorites. I've already added it, so mine is grayed out, but that's a good one to come back to. So let's hit apply. Yes, and okay, and once again, yes. So it looks a little bit better if I were to measure. All right, 672 feet. I think that's pretty good. So that is my spiel on coordinate systems. We are now ready to put this into a layout. Now, because this is longer than it is taller, I'll probably want a landscape mode. And I just clicked down to my layout button here. If you give it a moment, I think it will draw our data frame. No, eventually it'll come up here. You know what? And just let me double check. Okay, just want to make sure I wasn't editing. So it may or may not pop up here, but to change this layout, right click in white space out here and click on Page and Print Setup. Here's where I can select Landscape, and I'll hit OK. There's my data frame that finally showed up. So here's what I'd recommend. You can either just know what scale you want to use, or you can kind of ballpark it and then adjust as necessary. So And I'm going to turn off my base map just because it takes a little while to redraw. When you're in layout mode, I would also recommend that you pay attention to these two toolbars. You've got your normal toolbar, and you've also got this one called layout. These names are good to remember because if you ever lose one, you can right click up in this area and just go ahead and find it to bring it back. So there you go. Let's just move these over. The toolbar is for navigating and zooming around your data frame. Your layout toolbar is for zooming and navigating around your layout. So what I'll do is take my zoom tool, just kind of get that close. It doesn't matter necessarily that this frame is going off of the edge of my paper because that just won't get exported. But this looks pretty close. You know, this fits. So how do we find out what the best scale is for showing this? Well, if we look here, our ratio scale is 1 unit to 6477 units. I'm going to bust out the calculator, and that is about 1 inch equals 540 feet, which is a weird, goofy scale you do not want to use. If I wanted to just use 500, that would be 1 to 6,000. And I probably didn't need my calculator to figure that one out, but it's early, so. All right, yeah, and it kind of cuts off the edge here, so let's try what would be the next logical one, probably 400. Oh wait, no, that's the wrong direction. Oops, I actually want 600, which would be 7,200 feet, right? Yes. All right, so 1 inch equals 600 feet works pretty well. Now, when that gets close, I may want to turn on my Bing map again. Okay, so that's a pretty good setup. Keep in mind, I can see my Bing map, but if I turn that off, that's where my paper will end. All right, so I've got this area down below to start adding other things, such as a scale, my legend, and you know, maybe some other graphics, maybe some other eye candy. So I'll start with the scale. Go to Insert, Scale Bar. If everything else is correct, all you should have to do is select one and hit OK. So there we go. If you want something a little bit more styled, you can double click on that and then just kind of dig through this. Where did I see frame format? Oh, here's the style. That's what I was looking for. So all kinds to choose from. Find one that works. Whoops. If that happens, sometimes it just gets way out of whack. Best thing is to delete it and insert it once again. There we go. It's also neat because it is a dynamic scale bar. If I drag it, it automatically updates. If you drag it vertically, you want to be careful because it makes your text get very large very quick. So, you know, that's a pretty nice scale bar. Let's call that good. Might want to add a north arrow. Simple is good. Oops, and I accidentally just resized it. Careful where you click. Now you might want to play around with this. You know, if your graphics read with overlapping, you know, feel free to do that. That's a little bit tough to read, so I don't know if I would necessarily call that a good idea. Now I also might want to add a written scale. Graphic scales are good, so are written scales. Get all your bases covered for when this gets reproduced. I could do scale text, but for this example, I'll just add normal text. It's very tiny. It's right here. If you double click on it, we can edit this. 1 inch equals 600 feet. We can change our font, but there's another way I like to change it. One thing you can't do here is scale this by just grabbing the corner. So what I would recommend is have open your draw toolbar. Yep, that's the one you want. You might be tempted to say, "Ooh, I want to put graphics." Open the graphics one. A good toolbar, but not what you would think. So the draw toolbar has the information for your font and font size. If I click on that, I can change my font size to something larger. So it's, you gotta be be a little patient, because if you've spent a lot of time learning Illustrator, you'll be very frustrated with how this works. But it's a good tool set to have and be able to do. So there we go. It's getting there. Next thing would be to add my legend. These guys over here. This part's kind of fun because insert legend. It just gives you a nice little wizard here. This is your legend items. If you have more than one legend, you can add that. So one might be for showing the values. I might have another legend that shows, I don't know, some kind of symbology for the context or the streets. But since I've only got only one legend item is showing up. Hit next. The rest of this is really, you just play around with it and figure it out. The legend title, this is what the text that will show up. Let's call this par. There we go. This, I like keeping it simple. So, for the area, this is the size of the little graphic for next to each label. I'll do the rounded rectangle just so you can see what it looks like. And you know what? Let's just hit finish. There we go. So I mentioned this in class too. Getting it created, is step one. If you want this to remain dynamic, for example, if I change this color to, let's find something close. Mud yellow. I want it to stay close, but watch this. I'll change it over here. It's automatically updated in my legend. If I change the names or even the symbology, that gets changed. So I could add or remove, this automatically get changed. But once it's close, it's kind of nice to edit more like parts, kind of the Illustrator mindset. So what I like to do is right click and convert to graphics right there. Now you still need to ungroup it, so right click, ungroup, and now we've got something that I can delete those. I will select these and I will group those again. Now I can style this a little bit. A little bit better. So still need a title over here. I deleted the one I had. I'll just add text again. There it is. It always makes it pretty stinking small here. So right away, with that selected, let's just crank it up. And if I double click, I can change my justification right here. What would be a good thing to call this? Could I convert that to graphics too? Nope, I can't. So you have to change the size over here. So all right, we're getting close. A couple more things I'd maybe want to change. One, if you've got your draw window open, so you've got your basic draw tools here. If I want to draw a shape, congratulations, you've just drawn a shape. If you want to insert graphics, really quite easy. You can do it by inserting, or you can do it by cutting and pasting. So let's try let's find some one-way graphics, because that is a theme of my map. Oh wait, I found a movie. Good enough. Let's steal this graphic. Don't do this, but I'm just doing it to show you guys. If I copy that image, right click, paste. Couldn't be easier. Now, it is okay to do that if you can find things that are Creative Commons. This one probably is not. Wikipedia usually has a good licensing. So here it tells you how you can use it. Still be careful about that. Tend to use, try to use graphics that are either Creative Commons or ones that you have created. Let's find another one. There's one. Right click. Copy image. So you can make your own little collage here. Doing that. So it's better. This map is probably, B caliber, right? How do we spice it up a little bit more? Get that coveted A. Well, we could style this a little bit more, make it a little bit more readable. Let's double click on base map. I'll change that display to a 50% transparency. Okay, so that changed that. Now, this might actually read a little bit better. It's not quite there, but let me undo that. It makes the other things a little bit more readable. We could add some labels. So if I wanted to make my streets a little bit easier to read, I'll insert some text again. Let's say first. I can kind of see it on my map, but I'll also add it here just to make it a little bit easier. And let's make that bold and maybe size 8. So if you hold down Control while you drag that, whoops, don't do that. I just made a copy of my data frame, so now I've got 2 data frames over here. Let's see. Undo. All right. I've got just my text selected here. So now if I hold down Control, as I drag, you can make copies of it. I'll dump that one right here, and dump that one right here. And I'll make a copy down here. This one I will change to NP. And I could do the same thing. Just make a few copies of it. This one here might look a little bit better if it's rotated on my draw toolbar. There's a rotate button right there. So it's getting pretty close. Now, for this assignment, I still want you to be completely self-contained in ArcMap. If you're doing this for a class project and you get really frustrated, you can save this as an Illustrator or as a PDF and then open it in Illustrator. One word of caution. If you do that, you might want to put, for example, a transparency on your shapes here. Do that in Illustrator, because if you add a transparency here, like this, visually it looks kind of nice, but it gets exported as one raster graphic, and that's not what we want. So just a little side note, if you want it to be exported as editable shapes and layers, now just layers in Illustrator, you want that to be solid. I did the opposite of solid. I made it 100% transparent. There we go. Now, another little side note. I showed you with examples of how to dissolve. You might look at this and say, well, maybe I want to dissolve all of these because they're all the same anyway. That works good for categories, but not so much for values, because if I were to come back and edit these, I want to know that that parcel chunk right there, each parcel is in that range. If you were to do a dissolve, you would want to use the statistics field to add together those values, because that becomes 450 times 6 or 7. Now, you can do that. There's not a linear process here. You might decide that you want to do that. You can, with that set selected, you can still do a geoprocess even though you're in layout view. And I would do dissolve. Input the features, select, so I'll do total value. Now your statistics field, this is where you would select total value and the statistics type. Now you got a little red X here because you still need to give it a statistics type. Well, somewhere in here I can tell it to do, oops, you know what, let's get rid of that. I think I need to do it this way. You need to put in your little formula. You know, I'm not going to continue to do that, but just know that there is a way here to add together values or average them. Also, while I am here, this one is important. Whenever you do a dissolve, if you have the create multi-part feature selected, it will merge anything with the same category. So for example, if I did a dissolve based off of the zone, everything that is DMU gets merged together, but it also gets put into one record. So there's only one line item essentially. If you don't want that, if you want every visually disjointed piece to be entered as a separate record, you will want to deselect that. So that is why when you select some of the parcels as they are, when we first import this, some of them, you know, you select one, something way off to the side gets selected. That tends to happen to things that end up in the other bucket or the unknown or the unclassified. So just keep that in mind. Let's get out of here because we're so close to getting done. Let's zoom out. Oh, you know what do we put in this area? How about a nice citation? And it adds so much more credibility to this. So let's say insert text. Oh, there it is. And I could do something as simple as data source. Now, in the real world, you'd probably also want to put some kind of disclaimers in here, like use at your own risk. These are just estimated values. I didn't make these up. Just things to protect you from getting attacked. Let's hit apply. You know, that's more of a fine print kind of thing. So, you know, my layout's getting a little messed up here. I'd probably need some more graphics, or maybe make it a little smaller. I don't know. I think I'm back down to B work here, but it's close. You know, I could nudge these around and get my layout looking a little bit better. If you want to scale things as a group, select them all. You know, I'm going to try a little experiment here. I'm going to group those and then scale it. Oh, nice. So there's a way you can change your text. I was telling you you had to use your draw toolbar, but if you group it in with something, you can also change it there too. So ungroup, you know, now I'm just getting picky, I guess. So what I'd recommend, you know, if you get this far, I think you're doing pretty good for this assignment. If you'd like to, you know, experiment with the other insert options here. The legend we've done, north arrow we've done, scale bar we've done, picture an object, just other ways to create or to insert these kinds of guys. Now, there is also a way to insert some other neat things like grid lines and graticules. When you see the maps that have like the A's on the side and the numbers on the bottom, that is usually under I might need to save that for another assignment, but it's somewhere around here that's pretty easy. The last step, the very last thing we need to do is export this. We don't save it. No, I have not even saved this file. That's probably a bad idea. But save will save your ArcMap working document in the .mxd format. This one I want to export map. Now, if you want to look through your options down here, go for it. Otherwise, just keep it as the default. So, you know, give it a name that makes sense. Save. That is the file that I would like to have uploaded to complete the assignment. There it is. So, you know, that is pretty much done, but just as a little side note here, I'm going to open this up in Illustrator. So this is kind of a neat thing. When we start getting to the Avenza plugin, hopefully you've got that installed. You can still open it if you don't, but if you have it installed, it retains the coordinate system, which is really nice. It retains all that geo-referencing. So just keep in mind, if you're opening it in Illustrator, without the plugin, it'll still open. It just won't retain this data, so you might need to skip past those first couple dialogues. Okay, now in Illustrator, got to get in a different mindset, but I can select and edit these using all that you know about Illustrator. Now, this one, you know, there's a few things lost in translation. It somehow thinks that these are all individual text blocks for each character, but what you might want to do is delete those. So this, again, this is not for this assignment. This is just a FYI, and we'll be doing stuff in Illustrator and Avenza later on. So hopefully that will help you complete your assignment. As always, let me know if you have any questions.